question everyone's typing into Google. At 2 a.m., somebody, somewhere, right now, is lying awake with a flight booked to Kuala Lumpur and a phone open to a search bar, typing some version of the exact same sentence. Is Malaysia safe? It's on Reddit. It's on travel forums. It's buried in the comments of every single YouTube video about Southeast Asia. It's the question nervously typed into Facebook travel groups by someone who just clicked purchase on a plane ticket and immediately started spiraling. And honestly, that question makes complete sense. Before you hand over your actual, hard-earned money for flights, hotels, and experiences in a country you've never once set foot in, you want an answer to one basic thing. Are you going to be okay? That's not paranoia. That's not overreacting. Nobody books a vacation hoping to end up in a police report. Nobody relocates their entire life to a new country without wondering if they'll feel secure walking to buy groceries after dark. Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy discovering fascinating stories about countries, economies, and the world around us, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It only takes a second, but it helps YouTube recommend these videos to more people. And I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Leave a comment with your country. If you're from Malaysia, comment Malaysia Boleh. If you're watching from anywhere else in the world, tell us your country and what surprised you most about Malaysia. Your support through every like, comment, and subscription helps this channel grow and brings more incredible stories like this to viewers around the world. Thank you for being here. Assalamu alaikum. Safety isn't a minor checkbox on a trip planning spreadsheet. When you're somewhere unfamiliar, far from anyone you know, it's basically the whole spreadsheet. But here's something I want to put on the table right at the start, before we go any further, because it changes the entire way you should be asking this question. There is no country on earth that is completely 100% safe. Not one. Not the United States. Not the United Kingdom. Not Switzerland. Not Singapore. Not Japan. Not Australia. Every single country carries its own problems. Every city on the planet has a corner it doesn't put in the tourism brochure, a neighborhood locals quietly avoid, a set of crime statistics nobody's printing on a postcard. So the real question was never, is this place perfectly safe? The real question is, what's your actual risk level? And is it meaningfully higher than the risk you're already living with back home without even thinking about it? That's exactly what we're figuring out today. Is Malaysia actually safe for tourists? We're going to dig through the real data, the actual crime statistics, what tourists genuinely report experiencing on the ground. And then we're going to hold all of that up against countries you've probably already visited without ever once questioning it. By the time we're done, your entire mental picture of this country might completely flip. So if you're planning a trip, or you've been going back and forth trying to decide if Malaysia is worth it, stick around to the very end, because there's a section coming up where we compare Malaysia directly against places you already trust, and the results might genuinely surprise you. So where does this fear actually come from in the first place? Why does one country get interrogated this hard, while others get a free pass? Why does everyone assume the worst? Let's actually dig into where this reputation comes from, because it didn't appear out of nowhere, and once you trace it back, the picture gets a lot less about Malaysia and a lot more about how perception gets built in the first place. Part of it is pure geography. Malaysia sits in Southeast Asia, and for a huge chunk of people in the West, the US, the UK, Australia, the entire region still carries this outdated mental snapshot of instability, poverty, and crime. That image was built on how the region actually looked decades ago, and it simply never got updated in most people's heads. Malaysia in 2024 is not Malaysia in 1984, but the picture a lot of travelers are still carrying around is exactly that, 40 years out of date. Part of it comes down to how news media actually functions. Bad news travels. When something goes wrong in Malaysia, a robbery, a tourist scam, a street crime incident, it can be a global headline within hours. But when 30 million tourists visit Malaysia in a single year, and 99.9% of them fly home with nothing worse than a sunburn and some regret about not buying more souvenirs, nobody writes that headline. There's no viral story titled, "Family has completely normal, pleasant vacation." The result is a wildly distorted picture. The bad stories are the only stories that travel, so the bad stories are the only ones people remember. What it's actually like on the ground. This is where we shift from spreadsheets to lived experience. Because numbers matter, but so does what a real visitor actually feels walking down a real street. The overwhelming majority of tourists who visit Malaysia describe feeling safe for the entire length of their trip. Kuala Lumpur, the capital, is a genuinely modern, well-developed city with world-class infrastructure, an excellent public transport network with the MRT and LRT rail systems, clean and well-lit streets through its main districts, and a cosmopolitan energy that tends to immediately dismantle whatever negative assumptions a visitor showed up carrying. Walk through Bukit Bintang, the Klaksruk area, or the Bangsar neighborhood at night, and you'll find lively, well-lit streets full of locals and tourists alike, going about their evenings without a hint of tension in the air. Then there's Penang, Georgetown, a UNESCO World Heritage Site on the northwest coast of peninsular Malaysia, is widely considered by experienced travelers to be one of the most relaxed, welcoming, and visually stunning cities anywhere in Southeast Asia. Walkable streets, extraordinary heritage architecture, legendary street food, and crime against tourists that is genuinely rare. Visitors consistently say they felt more at ease there than they expected, sometimes more at ease than they feel in cities much closer to home. Langkawi, the duty-free island out in the Andaman Sea, offers gorgeous beaches, crystal clear water, and dramatic limestone cliffs at a pace of life about as far from dangerous as a destination can get. Most visitors there are stressed about exactly one thing: which beach to lie on next. Safety isn't part of the conversation. Malacca, a historic port city carrying deep Portuguese, Dutch, and British colonial layers, consistently gets glowing safety reviews. Its old town is compact, walkable, and tourist-friendly, where the single most stressful decision you'll face is picking between a dozen excellent restaurants within a short stroll of each other. And Kota Kinabalu in Sabah, the gateway to Mount Kinabalu, world-class diving, and some of the most biodiverse rainforest anywhere on the planet, consistently earns positive safety feedback from international visitors. The people of Sabah have a reputation across Malaysia and among well-traveled visitors throughout Southeast Asia for genuine warmth and hospitality. That reputation didn't appear by accident. It was earned, one positive interaction at a time, over years. Does that mean nothing bad ever happens to a tourist in Malaysia? Of course not. Phone snatching is a real risk in certain busy urban areas. Bags have been grabbed off shoulders by motorbikes passing too close. Scams targeting tourists do happen. These incidents are real, documented, and shouldn't be waved away. But they're also not unique to Malaysia. And more importantly, they're manageable, with the same basic awareness any experienced traveler already applies in any major city on the planet. So if the overall picture looks this reassuring, does that mean every square kilometer of the country is equally safe? Not quite. And this next part is where honesty actually matters. So, is Malaysia actually safe? Here's the honest answer, pulled together from everything we've just walked through. Yes, with the same basic common sense you'd bring to any major city on Earth, and with genuine, specific awareness around one clearly defined region in eastern Sabah. The murder rate is lower than the US. The petty crime profile is comparable to Paris, Rome, or Bangkok, not worse. Solo female travelers report feeling safe. Families thrive there. Backpackers move through the entire country on well-worn trails without incident, year after year. And the destinations that show up on everyone's Malaysia bucket list: Kuala Lumpur's main districts, Georgetown, Langkawi, Malacca, Kota Kinabalu, all carry safety profiles roughly equivalent to any well-touristed city in Europe or Australia. The fear didn't come from the data. It came from outdated stereotypes about Southeast Asia, a media cycle that amplifies bad news and stays silent on the millions of uneventful, wonderful trips, the lingering emotional residue of MH370, and a double standard that quietly grades non-Western countries on a harsher curve than the one applied to the US, the UK, or South Africa. Once you actually look at the numbers side by side, Malaysia doesn't just hold up. In several categories, it comes out ahead of destinations that nobody thinks twice about booking. So if you've been sitting on a Malaysia trip, wondering if it's the safe choice, the data has already answered that question. The only thing left is to actually go see it for yourself. Then there's the MH370 factor. The disappearance of that flight in 2014 put Malaysia in the global news cycle in the most unsettling way imaginable. A genuine mystery that gripped the entire planet's attention for months, then years, because it was never fully resolved. And here's the thing. That tragedy had absolutely nothing to do with tourist safety on the ground in Malaysia. Nothing. But it planted a seed of unease in the global subconscious that turned out to be incredibly hard to dig back out. People started quietly associating the country's name with tragedy, even though the connection made zero logical sense for anyone actually deciding whether to visit Kuala Lumpur. And underneath all of that sits a broader pattern. Western media coverage simply treats non-Western countries differently. A crime story out of Asia, Africa, or Latin America gets disproportionate attention compared to an equivalent story out of Europe or North America. The bar for what counts as newsworthy danger quietly shifts depending on which part of the map the story is coming from. And that shapes how people feel, whether they realize it's happening or not. But feelings aren't data, so let's actually look at the data. What the actual numbers say according to the Global Peace Index, an annual ranking of 163 countries published by the Institute for Economics and Peace, Malaysia consistently lands among the safer nations, both across Asia and globally. In recent editions, it's ranked ahead of the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and even ahead of several European countries that pull in far more tourist traffic without facing anywhere near the same level of public suspicion. And this isn't old data propping up an outdated reputation either. As of the 2026 Global Peace Index, Malaysia has actually climbed to 12th safest out of 163 countries worldwide, up from 13th the year before, putting it second in Southeast Asia, behind only Singapore, and ahead of a long list of Western European nations that nobody thinks to question. Malaysian police reported index crime dropping over 6% year over year, alongside thousands of additional border security operations. The country's own home ministry has publicly stated its goal is climbing into the global top 10 within the next several years. This is a country actively getting safer while its online reputation stays frozen in the past. There's also a subtler point worth flagging here because it explains a lot of the confusion. A lot of the Malaysia is dangerous chatter online traces back to sites like Numbeo, which rank cities using crowdsourced, self-reported "how safe do you feel" surveys rather than actual verified police or government crime data. That's a perception index, not a crime index. And perception is exactly the thing we established earlier gets warped by outdated stereotypes and lopsided media coverage. The Global Peace Index, by contrast, is built from verified statistics on violent crime, political stability, and conflict. And on that actual data, Malaysia isn't hovering near the danger zone. It's sitting comfortably in the safer half of the entire planet. Now let's zoom into the number tourists actually care about. Violent crime. Nobody's lying awake worried about jaywalking fines. They're worried about being attacked, robbed at knife point, or landing in a situation where their physical safety is genuinely on the line. So let's put that directly on the table. Malaysia's intentional homicide rate, murders per 100,000 people, sits well below 2. For comparison, the United States consistently records over 5 per 100,000, and in some years, considerably higher than that. Translated plainly, if you're an American tourist flying to Malaysia, you are statistically walking into a country with a noticeably lower murder rate than the one you just left. That's not an opinion. That's just what the numbers say. The UK tells a similar story. London has seen rising knife crime in recent years, regularly covered in the news, and it still pulls in tens of millions of tourists a year without anyone pausing to ask whether visiting is a dangerous gamble. Kuala Lumpur doesn't get the same benefit of the doubt, despite the data not supporting treating these two cities as though they're on opposite ends of a safety spectrum. Australia has its own crime hotspots in specific urban suburbs. New Zealand, Canada, France, Germany, every single country that sends tourists to Malaysia has crime statistics that, if scrutinized with the same intensity applied to Malaysia, would raise a few eyebrows. The point here isn't that those countries are secretly dangerous. The point is that Malaysia is being graded on a curve that nobody else is being graded on. Now, to be genuinely fair and balanced, because that's the whole point of actually looking at data instead of vibes, Malaysia does have crime. Petty theft, especially phone snatching, has historically been a real concern in certain urban pockets. Kuala Lumpur, like every major city on Earth, has areas and situations where you need to be a little more switched on. But petty crime existing doesn't make a place dangerous. It makes it a city. The exact same dynamic exists in Paris, Barcelona, New York, Rome, and Bangkok, cities that nobody on Earth describes as too dangerous to visit. So the statistics paint one picture. But what do tourists who've actually been there say when they come home? Let's find out.